The following is an AZPM original production.
For AZPM, I'm Mark McLemore, and this is Arizona Spotlight. Coming up, a new book called The Gales of November looks back 50 years this week to the wreck of the SS Edmund Fitzgerald on Lake Superior. Author John U. Bacon shares what it was like to write about this uniquely remembered tragedy. The Wobo Show is a surreal but family-friendly stage event incorporating physical theater, magic, and whimsy. I'll talk with the two artists who make it all look easy. Our storyteller for November is Curt Beall. Find out why he thought he was coming to Tucson to die, only to find new life. And listen to some voices from last week's 36th annual All Souls Procession. Those stories are next on Arizona Spotlight. Monday, November 10th, 2025, marked the 50th anniversary of the wreck of the freighter, the SS Edmund Fitzgerald, caused by a storm on Lake Superior. It was a modern tragedy, but rather than being forgotten like many, the sadness of the loss of its crew of 29 men became everlasting because of a powerful song written by Canadian troubadour Gordon Lightfoot. Earlier this year, an exhaustively researched book by John Bacon called The Gales of November, The Untold Story of the Edmund Fitzgerald, was published. Bacon is a native of Michigan with a lifelong interest in the history of the Great Lakes and the Maritimers' lore that surrounds them. Those things are also true of AZPM's Michael Dauphiné, a familiar voice to listeners of Classical 90.5. And so I asked Michael to conduct this interview.
John, how did this story first come to your mind?
Like you, I grew up in the state of Michigan, so I was 11 years old when it happened. I do recall that, actually. I was in sixth grade, and then, of course, the song came out, so it's on all our minds. But having grown up on the Great Lakes, you can't help but think about it when you look across these vast inland oceans. And then 20 years ago, I pitched it to my agent at the time, who declined. Then 5 years ago, I've got a different agent, so I tried again, and it worked.
You conducted, I believe, over 100 interviews for this book, and your reader really gets to know the crew and the surviving families and loved ones. Tell us about the Fitz's crew.
Sure. Shipping itself, and you grew up on Port Huron, Michigan, which is watching all the sailboats, the freighters go by. So that's part of the story as well. But being surrounded by sailing, I really didn't know anything about it, which is kind of amazing. And when we say sailing, we're talking about, cargo ships, freighters, and so on. And I thought of why. There are only 30 crew per ship, and there are only 300 ships in the heyday, and 75 on the Great Lakes. That's only 9,000 guys, spread out over 8 states and the province of Ontario. So you're not going to meet them, and then even if they live next door, you're still not going to meet them because they're on a ship 9 months out of the year. So one of my real goals here is to get to know what it's like to be on one of these ships. What are the jobs like? What's your average day like? What's a different day like? What are the ports like? The life on board, the life on shore, and what are your families like, and where do they live? So I wanted to find out all that in this book, and I think we did a pretty good job of that. And a few of them, for example, there's Michael Binden, 47, a first chief engineer assistant, higher-ranking guy on the ship. He was about to celebrate his 25th anniversary with his wife, Helen, and about to retire also. And the day before the ship left on November 8th, 1975, he goes next door to Duluth and gets a 22-carat diamond ring to celebrate their 25th anniversary. And for reasons, Michael, I still don't know, he, instead of stuffing that in his duffel bag and, of course, traveling back to Toledo, where his wife is waiting for him, he gives it to a friend of his and says, "Please mail this to my wife," and with a little love note wrapped around the case. And, of course, you know what happens. The ship goes down, and 3 or 4 days later, she gets the ring in the mail, and she wore that the rest of her life, and she never remarried. So a lot of stories like that.
John, did you find anything in your research that surprised you?
Almost everything surprised me off that. And I was surprised that I was surprised. I've grown up on the lakes. We've got a place on a lake that feeds into Lake Michigan. I've been on all the lakes. I spent a year for the Detroit News just doing Great Lakes stories years ago. And yet I can say that 95% of what's in that book I did not know 4 years ago. I didn't have a full sense of just how big these lakes are. And of course, you know from Port Huron, where you're from, that you can't see across these lakes. And that's not because of the fog or the mist. That's because of the curvature of the earth. They're inland seas. So that's one thing. And for your Arizona listeners, the Great Lakes combined are bigger than Rhode Island, Connecticut, Massachusetts, New Hampshire, Vermont, the state of Maine, and the state of New York, incredibly. So that's how big these things are. They're huge. And Superior is bigger than the island of Ireland. So that's one big thing. I was surprised to learn that these lakes are actually more dangerous to commercial sailors than is the Atlantic Ocean, which blew my mind. And I had to hear that, Michael, several times before I believed it. This is for a variety of reasons: saltwater versus freshwater, the location of the storms 1,000 miles away or right over your head. But these things, they say, are more dangerous. And from 1875 to 1975, there were 6,000 shipwrecks on the Great Lakes. That's one per week, every week for a century, losing 30,000 crew. That's one per day, every day for a century. So these things are enormous and incredibly dangerous. And all that was news to me.
There's already a lot written speculating about what ultimately led to the Fitz sinking. Lots of factors. There was unpredicted weather. There were some new construction techniques on the ship. There could have been some corporate greed involved. In your estimation, what happened?
Great question. Hard to answer quickly, but I'll do my best. I would say that I first side with John Tanner, the former superintendent of the Great Lakes Maritime Academy in Traverse City. He said that when a big ship goes down, it is rarely one thing. It's usually a confluence of elements that combine to create the worst possible outcome. In this case, it was the storm of the century, delivering ultimately 100-mile-per-hour winds, that's hurricane force, and waves up to 60 feet tall. One of my experts also said that ship ended up in the worst possible place at the worst possible time. So it was the only ship within about an hour of that point. So that's a huge factor. The way the ship was built made it more flexible than others, which might have been a factor. The laws had changed to allow it to carry about 4,000 more tons than it was designed for. That's got to be a factor there as well. They also took the northern route, which is the slower, longer way hugging the shore of Lake Superior, three sides of a square, basically, versus the lower shore, which adds 14 hours to your trip. That allows the storm to set up shop in Whitefish Bay before you get there, like a catcher guarding home plate. It was a good decision and a rational one, but I think it backfired. And then, of course, you have the usual mechanical failure of long radar out, short radar out, the lighthouse you're trying to get to, that light went out. The radio beacon from that lighthouse also went out. So now you're sailing blind, and that's when Captain McSorley, arguably the best on the Great Lakes, probably went over 6 Fathom Shoal, this little spit of land in the middle of Lake Superior, where it's only about 36 feet deep, that's 6 fathoms, but also in some places 11 feet deep. And this ship already drafts 29 feet on a good day, and this is not a good day, so it should be nowhere near it. And if that happened, it would explain why it was taken on water later on and listing or leaning to starboard, to the right side. And now you've got all these problems at once, and then this gigantic storm comes in on top of that when you're a three-legged animal in the wild, very vulnerable to getting sent under. So I hate to say it, but all those things are factors. And I kind of side with Ruth Hudson, the mother of Bruce Hudson, the only child she had and lost, of course, on the ship. She said, ultimately, only 30 know, 29 men and God, and no one's talking. So that is unsatisfying, I realize, Michael, but that's probably the case.
I mean, I don't think we can talk about the Edmund Fitzgerald without talking about Gordon Lightfoot's song, which, of course, commemorates tragedy through song, loss through music. I've heard you say, John, that without the song, this book doesn't exist. Say more about that.
Undeniably true. Look, when you approach this subject, you better be humble enough to realize just that. Without the song, there's no book because no one's going to care. As I said earlier, Michael, there are 6,000 shipwrecks on the Great Lakes during that 100-year period, from 1875 to 1975, and everyone knows one, and it's Edmund Fitzgerald, and it's because of the song. I got to say, too, that Gordon Lightfoot did a great job on the song. It's 95% accurate. He went to great pains to make it accurate, while making it lyrical, of course. And the amazing thing is, they almost didn't record the song. It was very unlikely that it was created, and even more unlikely that it was a hit. So he had worked on the song himself for several weeks. They got to the studio in Toronto. They had 5 days to record 11 songs, and this was not one of them. for his album Summertime Dream. And they finished the 11 songs in 3.5 days out of 5. So it's an efficient band. They got it done. And Gordon Lightfoot tells his band, nice work, guys. Well done. And they're packing up their guitar cases literally at that point. And then the producer says, why don't you try that song you've been screwing around with? And he said, it's not ready. And he said, look, we're charging you for 5 days, whether you use this or not. I'm here right now. We got the board. We got the band. Why not try it? And he finally gets talked into it. And he tells them to dim the lights. And he is quiet for about a minute. And then Barry Keane, the drummer who's still around and very helpful to me, he says, what do you want me to do? Because he's never heard the song. And he says, I'll give you a nod when I want you to come in. He says, okay. And then Gordon Lightfoot goes for a minute and a half, which back then is almost a full song, which go about 2.5 minutes back then. And so Barry Keane thinks, okay, he's forgotten all about me and he's almost finished. Nope. At 1:34 exactly, he turns to Keane, gives him the nod, and Keane comes in with that now famous, iconic, really, drum fill, which sounds like the storm coming in. You cannot hear the song without it. Your brain fills it in for you. So they finish the song, and they think, you know what, not bad. At 6 minutes and 28 seconds, incredibly. Say, let's try it again. They tried it again that day 4 or 5 more times. They tried it again the next day, their off day, 10 more times. And never was it better than it was the first time they even tried it. And Barry Keane told me that first takes happen once in a while in the business, but the first time he ever played it, never, ever, 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 ever. The song you hear on the radio to this day is the first time the band ever even heard the song. And that's how incredible it is. And I asked Keane, how did that even work? And he said, man, this is not a song that you think your way through. This is a song that you have to feel it for it to work. We felt it strongest the first time. So that's the song you hear, and they did not expect it to be a hit. This song has no hook. It has no guitar solo. It has no chorus. It's just a really well-told story, and that's why on that list is the only song from 76 we're still listening to.
John, this past week was the 50th anniversary of the wreck of the Fitzgerald. How have people been marking and acknowledging this week?
More broadly than I would have expected. Almost every maritime museum on the Great Lakes, and there are about 10 or 15, had some big event, of course, and others did privately. I was at Whitefish Point, which is where the big brass bell has been brought up from the depths, from the ship itself. And that's where the families always converge for the various anniversaries. And incredibly, with an announcement and no tickets and no hotels anywhere near, 3,000 people came up for an outdoor event in 30-degree weather for 90 minutes, including the governor of the state of Michigan, Gretchen Whitmer, who's a potential presidential candidate. She was there. And that night we had 80 people only for a private ceremony at 7 o'clock, which is when the ship went down. So far, that has gotten more than 500,000 hits live stream.
I want to ask you about one more thing regarding a bell. John, you mentioned the famous bell that was recovered from the bottom of Lake Superior that's now on display at the museum in Whitefish Point. There's also a famous bell at Mariners Church in Detroit that is used every year. Could you tell us about that?
Sure. A guy named Harry Atkins, that night when they heard that the ship had gone down, Monday night, November 10th, that guy and a photographer drove up all the way to Sault Ste. Marie, which is where the locks are and where the Coast Guard is, to write a story about it, basically. And I didn't know Harry had done this. Harry's 84 years old now. I'm a sports writer by trade. Harry and I shared press boxes around the state of Michigan for 30 years. I had no idea he had written this story until a mutual friend of ours, Larry Lage, who took over his job, said, Harry wrote that story. And Harry's still sharp, and he's got a copy of it, so he went up there that night. And he wrote this wonderful story that was so good it ran across 6,500 newspapers around the world. And someone reports that the pastor, Reverend Ingalls, went outside to ring the bell 29 times. I looked into this. To this day, they have no idea who reported that. It could not have been Harry Atkins. That is, who witnessed Pastor Ingalls doing that, is anonymous to this day. And Ingalls and his son both said they did do it, and his son was young at the time and took over for him later on. So that's the story behind the bell. But honestly, without that utter mystery of who witnessed the pastor doing this, I don't know if Lightfoot writes his song, frankly. So on these thin threads, the story survives.
John, thank you so much for the talk today. I really appreciate your time.
Well, thank you, Michael. A lot of fun.
That was my colleague and true Michigander, Michael Dauphiné. He spoke with John U. Bacon about his book, The Gales of November, The Untold Story of the Edmund Fitzgerald, available now. Wolf Boart was the son and grandson of writers and painters, and he was always encouraged to pursue his artistic passions. He began learning the circus arts from the age of 9 and began performing as a teen. Boart has graced Tucson many times with his comedic, often wordless plays that offer a break from the modern world and the bounds of reality. Still active in performing and teaching, Boart has now taken on a mentee and performance partner, Xochitl Martinez. Together, they've been putting together new shows since late 2023 at Tucson Scoundrel and Scamp Theater. I start this interview by asking Wolf Boart to recall one of his most influential mentors.
So I studied under Clowniotta with a K, and Don Reeder and Val Dean. And Don is a tall, lanky, goofy-faced fellow, not unlike myself. And he studied in Czechoslovakia in the 70s, late 60s, I think, and early 70s. So it was very angst-filled, very big stuff. He buried himself under 500 pounds of coal chunks, giant coal pieces, and that's how he started his show. And so it was it was an intense work.
So climbing out of this pile of coal,
and it was hilarious.
Was a bit.
Yeah, it was hilarious. You saw his hand come out first, and then a handkerchief, and it was very Brecht, very Beckett. And Valdine did de Creux work, which is almost dance-like mime, and so it was a very disciplined. Also Grotowski work, and other Eastern European influences. And they were great mentors for me because they were so disciplined in their work and very, very funny.
What's a lesson that you still lean on that you learned under that tutelage?
It was a simple exercise of walking upstairs, and you would fall upwards. As you walked, you'd let your legs swing from the hip, and then your foot would plant, and you'd sort of lean up into it. Like skiing is falling downhill, controlled falling downhill. This was a way of walking uphill. And I think of that often as a metaphor when you're going through hard times, to just think of sort of falling up the stairs.
And Xochitl, for you, when did the performing arts and doing the kind of physical theater that you and Wolf perform, when did that become a possibility for you?
I've been doing theater for as long as I can remember, since elementary school, and I first started working with Wolf in a show called One Twig at a Time, which was a show that he wrote and directed, and it had an ensemble of us, and I really had no idea what I was getting myself into. I didn't know what to expect. I had never really had any exposure to this form of theater before, but I met with Wolf briefly before we started rehearsing for this show called One Twig at a Time, and he sent me a full video of one of his shows called Letter's End, which is a one-man show that he did, and watching that, I was really just blown away by the level of execution, by the specificity of every movement, and how such a powerful story could be told with very few words. And so I watched that and I just got so excited at the prospect of working on this kind of theater and working with Wolf. And so I didn't know what I was getting myself into, but I was very excited to just dive headfirst into that.
What's your current educational status?
I'm currently a senior at the U of A, and I'm studying psychological sciences and then minoring in Spanish.
And can you share, rattle off just a few of the skills that you and Wolf have worked on defining?
So through working with Wolf, I have learned how to fall into a trash can. I've learned how to climb inside a giant balloon. I've learned how to juggle. I have learned that in a show with very few words, the movement needs to be that much more specific. So something as simple as an exit that you might watch as an audience member and not think twice about, turning your head, turning your shoulders, and leaving with intention. So that gives something as simple as an exit that much more specificity and that much more clarification.
Falling in a trash can is a life skill.
Falling into a trash can is a life skill, and I talk about it every day. And that's become what I'm known for among my friends, is the trash can girl. So I'm honored to have that title.
Wolf, how did you go from being a student, a journeyman, an artist, a professional, to now being a tutor?
It's interesting doing this work for so many years and the repetition, and it's clown theater essentially. So it's not just the tricks and the skill and the juggling or the walking on your hands and breaking down the beats of a yada yada or a Jack Benny deadpan or a Stan Laurel eyebrow raised confused look. It's not just about those beats. It's about creating a piece of theater around it and telling a story and also using your platform as an artist. So there's all these things that go into it. And over years and years of doing it, making a living at it and also touring the world, 25 countries or so, and teaching along the way. Over the years I've been teaching. There's a joy now in not passing the torch, because I'm still holding on to the metaphoric juggling torch. I'm not passing it yet. But just that sharing of the knowledge and of the time that I've put into these beats and these moments and these ways of thinking and the way of storytelling visually. And I also feel a huge responsibility to being in this lineage of these people, of Chaplin and Keaton and Jacques Tati and Ernie Kovacs and Monty Python and things like that, because that's all the things that influenced me. And then Sochi's the next generation of that, and watching Sochi, who comes at it, being a great deadpan at such a young age allows me, the older guy, to be the wiggly, goofy puppy dog clown. And it's just a joy doing this work and continue to work in this genre, but now with somebody much younger and somebody with a hunger to gain the knowledge from the master.
Sochi, does playing deadpan come naturally to you?
I would say yes when I'm on stage and I'm in it and I'm feeling the energy of the audience and feeling the energy between me and Wolf. It does come naturally. Outside of performance and rehearsal, I have to give myself space to laugh a lot at everything, because I remember when I first started working with Wolf, sometimes it was very hard to keep a straight face on stage. But through that experience and through that time, I think that I've really found the power in stillness and learning how to be still and how my stillness accentuates the comedy of what he's doing. Because if I'm still and I'm deadpan and I'm looking at the audience and interacting with the audience, and he's running around and he's goofy and he's wiggly and he's can't stay still, then that dynamic is much more interesting than if I were to also be doing the same thing. It wouldn't have the same amount of power. So I would say yes, it does come naturally, just being deadpan and being still and learning to feel comfortable with being still and just really engaging with the audience in that way.
Among the many theaters in Tucson, Scoundrel and Scamp is one of the still newer theaters, but one that has really made a name for itself and established the type of entertainment that they like to present. So tell us a little bit about your home base for the Wobo Show.
Scoundrel and Scamp is a 100-seat theater in the old historic Y building. Itself, an incredible building. They support us, the Wobo Show, and they do things like, for young people, they'll do Little Prince or different visual theater young people pieces. But then they also, for example, last season did the first Mac Fest. So it was a Macbeth festival.
It concluded with a 5 Acts, 5 Macs festival where 5 different theater companies each were assigned to an act of Macbeth and came together, and there were probably over 70 people in this show in total. And it was really just a beautiful way of including the entire Tucson community in something that had never been done before, and really just brought all these groups of people together that might not have otherwise been centralized in one spot. It was a really amazing event. And very unique.
Scoundrel and Scamp Theater has a lot of heart and a lot of community involvement, and traditionally in its short life has been a home for visual and physical theater for all ages.
When I asked Sochi if leaping headfirst into a trash can was difficult, she said no, only getting out can be. Wolf Boart and Xochitl Martinez present the latest iteration of the Wobo Show, Friday through Sunday, November 21st, 22nd, and 23rd at the Scoundrel and Scamp Theater in Tucson. The artists were also recently featured on Arizona Illustrated on PBS 6, and you can see them in action now on the Spotlight page at azpm.org. There's something very powerful about a single voice sharing a true story. It gives a chance for the storyteller to let their personality shine and forge new connections with anyone who listens. In support of this important community tradition, Arizona Spotlight is featuring a different storyteller on the third Thursday of each month. Here's Tony Paniagua to tell us about our special guest.
Thank you, Mark. Our storyteller this month is Curt Beall, who moved to Tucson from upstate New York in the 1990s. It wasn't for a new job, a desire for warmer weather with more sunshine, or to retire. Instead, Beall thought he was going to die soon. For years now, he's been sharing his message, hoping that his personal experience can help others.
My name is Curt Beall, and this is my HIV/AIDS story. It's hard to believe that it's been over 40 years since that fateful day in Fire Island that I decided to have unprotected sex, even though I knew about the new disease that was affecting gay men. I hadn't thought about that day for over 7 years when in 1990, during a regular doctor's visit, I was asked if I had been tested for HIV. I had been in a relationship for 7 years and didn't think I was at risk for HIV. I didn't know that it could take years before the disease manifests itself into major illness. I said yes to being tested and didn't think much about it until the doctor called and said I needed to come in for a follow-up to review my results. He said, "Curt, not only are you HIV positive, you have AIDS." He explained to me that in his experience, I had 18 to 24 months to live. I was just 29 years old. I was in shock, to say the least. I had just finished playing in a 3-day volleyball tournament and worked out 4 days a week, but was just feeling a little crummy. All I kept thinking was this couldn't be happening to me. I was on a management fast track with an advertising company, and my career opportunities were exploding. I had just won a prestigious award for managers with my company and was slated for a promotion soon. AIDS was not what I expected to hear that morning in the doctor's office. He referred me to an infectious disease specialist who treated people with HIV and AIDS. I cried, and then I cried some more. I had watched several friends die of this disease, and now it was my turn. I couldn't tell my family. There were 10 brothers and sisters, and it would have been too much for them to handle since we had just found out that my mother had terminal lung cancer. I confided in one of my sisters, and we made a pact that no one else would know about it until it was absolutely necessary. We were both concerned that I would be discriminated against and avoided by others who were uneducated about how this disease is transmitted. We immediately contacted the local AIDS service organization. We met with a counselor at the AIDS Community Services of Buffalo, and we cried some more. She walked us through all the services that were available to me, including individual counseling, group meetings, housing, and food assistance programs. I had written checks to this organization in memory of many of my friends who had died of AIDS, but never knew all the services that were available to me now. I was blown away by the support and unconditional caring that every staff member showed to me. Within a month, I was on AZT, which was the only drug that was available at that time. My partner was tested the next month, and his results returned negative. I read every article I could on AIDS. I started eating a macrobiotic diet, which really isn't the most flavorful. I exercised, I quit smoking, I read self-help books, and I went to group meetings and kept hoping that maybe I was different and wouldn't follow the path that most of my friends had taken. I watched so many waste away to nothing before they died. I prayed, yes, I prayed, that this would not happen to me. I took my medications and never missed a dose and followed all the doctor's instructions, but to no avail. AZT stopped working, then the next round of drugs stopped working. I had lived for 3 years and still had not gotten an opportunistic infection. In 1994, my luck came to an end. First it was thrush, then night sweats, my T cells were falling, and then came my first hospitalization. I still didn't tell my family. My sister and I lied and told everyone there was an issue with my appendix. My doctor and I had a very frank conversation about my future, and I made the decision to quit my job. I had saved lots of money, and my partner wanted to move to Tucson, Arizona in order to be closer to his son, and I just wanted to live out my bucket list before I died. In January of 1995, I moved to Tucson. I went to the local gay community center, Wingspan, to get information on doctors in the area who treated HIV and AIDS. Every person I met said Dr. Kevin Carmichael was the doctor I should see. So I set up an appointment with his office at the El Rio Special Immunology Associates. I was also referred to the People with AIDS Coalition of Tucson, which we now call SAFE, Southern Arizona AIDS Foundation. I was still feeling okay, so I decided that here was my chance to give back. So many people in the last 5 years had held my hand and walked me through the maze that is an AIDS diagnosis. I felt it was my responsibility to help those who, like me, were dealing with a terminal diagnosis and trying to make the best of it. I answered phones, I stuffed envelopes, I helped run massage and acupuncture clinics. During this period of time, a new class of drugs was being introduced called protease inhibitors, which would change the face of AIDS. In combination with other medication, it would slow down the replication of the virus to undetectable levels. I made a commitment to myself that if I was to see the other side of this pandemic, that I would dedicate whatever time I could to helping out my community. I told my family about my HIV diagnosis and received nothing but unconditional support and love. The stigma surrounding HIV and AIDS is still a major issue. Recent funding cuts are going to have a drastic effect on prevention, education, and services. This disease did not go away. More than 30,000 Americans are infected with HIV every year, so the burden of care and costs are only growing. I implore everyone to get tested for HIV. Knowledge is power, and this is no longer a death sentence, but a manageable disease. So on December 1st, World AIDS Day, I will remember my friends who died of this disease. And on December 6th, I will walk in AIDS Walk Tucson to help support SAFE and the services they provide to people like myself living with HIV.
Curt Beall stays very active in the community and volunteers at various organizations. He also plays the guitar for seniors, leads walking and hiking groups, and steps up to the plate when needed. In addition to HIV and AIDS, he is also a cancer survivor, which he battled during the COVID pandemic. As millions of people get ready to celebrate Thanksgiving next week, Beall says he's always mindful to be grateful for his blessings and second chances. For Arizona Spotlight, I'm Tony Paniagua.
Last Sunday was the 36th anniversary of one of Tucson's most unique community events. The All Souls Procession began as artist Susan K. Johnson's tribute to her late father, with fewer than 20 people joining her in an impromptu costumed parade. Now it attracts visitors from around the world, hundreds of thousands of them, and together they become an enormous display of creativity, remembrance, and revelry. The procession is a reminder of how easily we can come together when united by compassion, in honor of the loved ones that we have lost. AZPM's Katya Mendoza was in attendance, where she talked to a handful of participants about why the All Souls Procession is important to them.
My name's Bidabit Benavides. I mean, the outfit I just kind of threw together. I tried to go floral, dark floral, but the parasol features, I have 3 ants on here, and then my grandmother and my dogs, and well, obviously I have a few who have gone from my life, and just coming every year. My Aunt Kelly actually died a couple days before the first one that I went to. Me and my mom went, and we just thought of her, and now every year I bring my son, and it's just a place to feel like they're with me again. And I always put a little note in the urn that says, you know, save a piece of heaven for me and I'll save a piece of life for you. But I think it's super amazing to have everybody here, and we're all feeling the same things, and we're thinking of the ones that we love, but it's not sad, and that's just really important for me, because I do get sad, of course, thinking back on my loved ones, but knowing that everybody here shares somebody and is feeling the same thing is just, it creates a warm feeling.
My name is Guadalupe Cepeda. So I am wearing a traditional Chiapaneco dress. This is handmade in Chiapas. It's a traditional cultural dress that's usually divided into two pieces. The whole thing is embroidered by hand, and the colors are chosen by the artisans as they make it. It represents a lot of culture. It also honors the Mayan women that make it. And I'm wearing monarch butterflies on my braids, and I'm wearing cempasúchil flowers on my hair, representing the Dia de los Muertos essence, helping my loved ones and guiding them home also. I think we underestimate what grief looks like a lot of times, and so I know we are here as the All Souls Procession to mourn and share the non-linear journey of grief as a community. But grief also comes in different sizes and in different scenarios.
Okay, so my name is Natalie Granados. I am wearing a huipil with pink butterflies and pink embroidery made in Oaxaca, which I had recently discovered that my grandma's roots are from Oaxaca, so that is who I am representing. As well, I am also wearing a crown piece, which is made of corn husk, and it has little corns on it, which I'm also representing the land where I come from, where the corn is very sacred to us. For me, well, since I started the walk right now, my eye has not stopped tearing up, which tells me that I am carrying a lot of grief. So I know a lot of people right now, they're feeling a lot of grief. Also, the tears can not only be from that grief, but also the memories of happiness that are still within me that were brought to me by those who have passed. And so, yeah, just grief and joy all together.
My name is Sarah Bratt. I am wearing what my representation is of Talavera pottery. And my family has a factory in Mexico, and we've sold Talavera pottery in the southwestern United States for more than 20 years. So that's what I'm representing today in this costume. I think that this processional, even though it's rooted in a very traditional, very specific processional that happens based out of Oaxaca, I think Tucson has made this really our own. And the reason I mention that is because this feels like the one place that people who don't have a voice to talk about loss, which can sometimes feel a little bit lonely, even though it's something we all go through, this is the one place that you can feel open to express your feelings about it. You can see people crying, and it's not unusual, but you also see people supporting each other. So I think that speaks volumes about our community and how much effort we're putting into this night so that people can feel comfortable expressing how they feel about loss and how they feel about their communities, their families, and things that are going on in the world. And it's a beautiful thing.
Thank you for listening to Arizona Spotlight. This show is a production of AZPM. The production engineer is Jim Blackwood. I'm producer and host Mark McLemore.
AZPM's original productions are made possible in part by donations from listeners like you. Learn more at support.azpm.org. Thank you.